It takes a special kind of panic to make the world's most powerful financial institutions consider sabotaging their own innovations. Yet here we are, watching the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, is contemplating pulling the plug on its own groundbreaking financial project. Why? Because Russia and China might use it to bypass the dollar. Remember when banking was simple? When Wall Street and the City of London could casually decide the financial fate of entire nations over lunch at the Harvard Club. Those days are ending, and the panic in Western financial corridors is palpable. As one Morgan Stanley executive recently confided, "We used to joke about BRICS being an investment banker's fairy tale. Now it's keeping us up at night." Let's cut through the diplomatic niceties and political posturing to understand what's really happening. The Bank for International Settlements, BIS, created mBridge, a revolutionary payment system designed to make international transactions faster, cheaper, and more efficient. It was supposed to be their crowning achievement in modernizing global finance. But then something happened that sent shockwaves through Western financial corridors. Vladimir Putin stood at the BRICS summit podium and essentially said, "Thanks for the blueprint, we'll take it from here." The response from private banking giants has been particularly telling. JP Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon, who once dismissed BRICS as a marketing term that would never amount to anything, recently spent 3 hours in closed-door meetings about it. As one attendee Riley noted, "It's amazing how quickly nothing can turn into everything in banking circles." But here's where history offers an interesting parallel. In the 1960s, Western banks dismissed Japan's attempt to create an Asian monetary fund. By the 1980s, they were scrambling to understand why Tokyo owned half of Manhattan. As one veteran banker recently observed, "The difference is, this time we're not just facing one Japan, we're facing half the world's population." Consider the scene at a recent private banking conference in Switzerland. The same institutions that publicly dismissed BRICS initiatives were privately wargaming scenarios for a post-dollar world. It's like watching someone plan their own retirement party while insisting they'll live forever, quipped one European central banker. The cognitive dissonance would be amusing if the stakes weren't so high. The internal conflicts between Western financial institutions have become almost comedic. The Federal Reserve wants to maintain strict control over global payment systems. The Bank of England suggests adaptation might be wiser. Meanwhile, the European Central Bank is doing what it does best, forming committees to study the formation of committees. As one Frankfurt banker noted with characteristic German directness, "We're responding to a revolution by scheduling meetings about it." But perhaps the most fascinating aspect is the technological sovereignty battle unfolding behind the scenes. Western banks are suddenly realizing that while they were busy protecting their traditional moat, China built a space elevator. The panic this has caused in IT departments from Wall Street to Canary Wharf is palpable. One senior tech executive at a major US bank recently admitted, "We spent the last decade perfecting our COBOL systems while they built the financial equivalent of Star Trek." In the 1970s, Western banks created SWIFT to modernize international payments. They then spent 50 years using it as a weapon of financial control. Now, as one Chinese official noted with elegant understatement, "Perhaps it's time for SWIFT to learn about Darwin's theories of adaptation." Meanwhile, in the mahogany-lined boardrooms of London's oldest banks, a different kind of panic is setting in. These institutions, some older than the United States itself, are watching their monopoly on global finance evaporate. "It's like being the finest horse-drawn carriage maker in 1910, observed one British banking executive. "You know change is coming, but you're too invested in the old way to embrace it." The response from different financial centers reveals a fascinating geography of denial. New York is angry, London is worried, Frankfurt is studying, and Tokyo is quietly hedging its bets. Singapore, meanwhile, is doing what Singapore does best, positioning itself to profit regardless of who wins. As one Asian banker observed, "When elephants fight, the wise monkey finds a tall tree and takes notes." What makes this situation particularly acute is the role of private banking giants. These institutions, which once considered themselves the unofficial arbiters of global finance, are watching their power base erode in real time. Goldman Sachs, which coined the term BRICS as an investment concept, now finds itself writing research reports about how to survive in a world where BRICS actually calls the shots. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The technological arms race has taken on almost absurd dimensions. Western banks, after decades of treating their IT departments as cost centers, are suddenly throwing billions at blockchain development. As one Deutsche Bank technologist noted, we've gone from blockchain is a solution looking for a problem to blockchain is the solution to our BRICS problem in about 3 months flat. Private banks are preparing for change in ways they'd rather their shareholders didn't know about. Behind those public statements about the dollar's unshakable dominance, they're quietly building parallel systems that could operate in a post-dollar world. One Citigroup executive, speaking off the record over what he insisted was definitely not Chinese tea, put it succinctly, "We're like a Vegas casino that's noticed the house advantage is disappearing. Time to learn some new games." The Bank for International Settlements' potential shutdown of mBridge isn't just an admission of fear, it's a masterclass in unintended consequences. By attempting to prevent BRICS nations from using the technology, they've essentially provided a proof of concept for why alternative systems are necessary. As one Russian banker noted with a smile that could freeze the Mediterranean, "Thank you for confirming exactly why we need our own system." While Western financial institutions publicly close ranks around the dollar, privately they're engaging in what one Swiss banker called the most expensive hedging operation in history. Every major bank now has a post-dollar strategy team, though they'd rather call it anything else. Standard Chartered's version is elegantly titled, Multiple Currency Framework Evolution Study Group. One insider commented, "We could have just called it Plan B, but banking requires at least 4 words to say anything." The generational divide within Western banks adds another layer of complexity. Older executives, raised on the gospel of dollar supremacy, are facing quiet rebellion from younger bankers who see the writing on the wall. During one particularly heated JP Morgan board meeting, a junior executive reportedly asked, "But what if the future doesn't need our permission to arrive?" The silence that followed was worth several trillion in market cap. Traditional financial centers are responding to the BRICS challenge with all the grace of a bull in a china shop pun, very much intended. Wall Street's strategy seems to be a curious mixture of denial and damage control. As one Federal Reserve official admitted, during what he thought was an off-record conversation, "We're trying to maintain our poker face while someone's changing the game to chess." The most telling response comes from the insurance departments of major banks. These traditionally conservative units are quietly developing products to hedge against systematic dollar displacement events. Bankers speak, for what if BRICS actually pulls this off? One product manager at AIG summed it up perfectly. "We're selling umbrella insurance while pretending it never rains." Western central banks are particularly caught in the crossfire. They need to maintain confidence in the current system while privately preparing for fundamental change. It's like watching a group of master chess players suddenly realize they're in a game of 3-dimensional chess, and half the pieces are moving by quantum rules. The Bank of England's recent internal memo, leaked with suspicious convenience, spoke volumes. The challenge isn't managing change, it's managing the perception of inevitability. The endgame scenarios being wargamed in Western financial institutions would make for fascinating reading, if they weren't classified as more secret than the recipe for Coca-Cola, as one Federal Reserve analyst joked. But glimpses emerge. Goldman Sachs has a team dedicated to what they euphemistically call monetary evolution scenarios. Morgan Stanley prefers structural realignment planning. One Deutsche Bank executive cut through the jargon. "We're basically writing the script for our own disruption and billing clients for the privilege." The resistance from Western institutions is having an effect opposite to what was intended. Each new restriction, each regulatory hurdle, each attempt to maintain control is actually accelerating the development of alternative systems. It's like trying to hold back the tide with a chain-link fence. As one Chinese central banker observed, every time they try to block us, they just give us a better map of where to build new roads. The unexpected winners in this financial revolution aren't just BRICS nations. They're the mid-sized financial hubs that have positioned themselves as bridges between the old and new systems. Singapore, Dubai, and Istanbul are quietly transforming themselves into the switchboards of a new financial order. "We're not choosing sides," explained one Singaporean banker. "We're choosing profits." This pragmatic approach has Western financial centers watching their traditional role as intermediaries slowly slip away. Perhaps the most delicious irony is watching Western banks rush to hire experts in BRICS financial systems, the same systems they publicly dismiss as unrealistic. One London headhunter recently quipped, "We're seeing more demand for UN clearing expertise than we've seen for dollar specialists in the last decade. Draw your own conclusions." The technological aspect has become almost comical. Western banks, after years of treating blockchain like a suspicious dinner guest, are now embracing it with the enthusiasm of a teenager discovering social media. But they're finding that technological leadership, once lost, is hard to regain. It's like trying to catch up to a bullet train while riding a bicycle, observed one MIT financial technology professor. Even if you're Lance Armstrong, physics isn't on your side. The private banking sector's internal communications tell the real story. Leaked memos from major institutions show a fascinating disconnect between public statements and private preparations. One particular document from a Big Four bank strategy department said it all. While maintaining absolute confidence in the current system, we recommend immediate and comprehensive preparation for its fundamental transformation. The diplomatic gymnastics required to write such sentences should qualify for the Olympics. Western financial institutions are discovering that power, like water, flows where it can, not where you want it to. Each attempt to maintain control through traditional means, sanctions, regulatory barriers, technical restrictions, simply demonstrates why alternatives are necessary. It's like giving a master class in why your monopoly needs to end. The final irony? The more desperately Western institutions fight to maintain their control, the more they prove they no longer deserve it. As one African central banker noted, when you have to force people to use your currency, perhaps it's time to ask why they're looking for alternatives. For those watching from the towers of Wall Street or the glass canyons of Frankfurt, the message couldn't be clearer. The future of finance will be multipolar, whether they like it or not. The choice isn't whether to adapt, but how gracefully to do so. As one veteran Swiss banker put it, the question isn't whether to change, it's whether to change while we still have some say in how it happens. And so, as Western financial institutions continue their increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control, they're writing the most compelling advertisement for BRICS alternatives they could possibly create. It's like watching someone try to stop a sunrise by building a wall. Impressive effort, wrong strategy. The story ends where it began, with the Bank for International Settlements contemplating shutting down mBridge. But perhaps this isn't really the end. Perhaps it's just the beginning of something much bigger. As one Chinese official noted in what might be the understatement of the century, sometimes the most powerful systems are built not by those who want to control everything, but by those who are tired of being controlled. In the end, the Western financial establishment's response to BRICS initiatives might be remembered as the moment they proved exactly why they needed to be replaced. As Brazil's central bank governor recently observed, with the kind of smile that suggests he knows exactly what he's saying, the best argument for change often comes from those fighting hardest against it. For those keeping score at home, the Western financial empire just played a perfect game of chess against itself and managed to achieve checkmate. The only question that remains is whether they'll gracefully tip over their king or flip the entire board trying to deny the inevitable. After all, as one wise observer once noted, the sun never set on the British Empire until it did. Perhaps it's time for Western financial institutions to invest in some good sunscreen. The forecast calls for significant changes in the financial weather, and dollar dominance isn't looking as permanent as it used to.